not a lawyer, but have you heard or seen the news about the former criminology student who pled guilty for the 2022 deaths of 4 University of Idaho students? Well, if you're unfamiliar with the story or want a quick recap on the news, let me fill you in. So this is 30-year-old Bryan Kohberger, and a little bit of a backstory is he's originally from Pennsylvania, but he moved to Pullman, Washington in June of 2022 to pursue his PhD in criminal justice at Washington State University. Now, a few months before he moved to Washington, he purchased a K-bar knife and sheath, which looks like this, off of Amazon. So fast forward, he moves to Washington, and starting in July, so about 1 month after he moved, his phone began connecting to a particular cell tower near a particular neighborhood. Worth noting that he lived in Pullman, Washington, which is on the border of where Idaho is. And so while he lived in Washington State, the incident occurred in Idaho, which was very close to where he lived. After the first connection to that cell tower, his phone continued connecting to that same tower 23 times between July 9th and November 7th, and it was only connecting between the hours of 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. So on the day of the incident, November 13th, 2022, prosecutors say that Kohberger went back to that area, circled the block a couple times, and then entered a home of some students, and using his K-bar knife and sheath, he took the lives of 4 students. And here's what they say happened.
We then move to the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022. The state's evidence would show that early morning hours on that day, Mr. Kohberger's phone left his Pullman residence. That phone was then subsequently turned off at approximately 2:54 a.m. and remained off until approximately 4:48 a.m. on Sunday, the 13th of November. Compiled surveillance that the investigators put together from businesses and residents then show the defendant's car, the white Elantra, as I've described, circling the 1122 King Road area, that neighborhood, starting around 3:30 or so in the morning. And the state's evidence would show that the defendant's car came back and parked behind and above the 1122 King Road residence. The state believes that its evidence would then show the defendant entered the residence of 1122 through the kitchen sliding door on the back side of the residence, which is the side of the residence that would face the area above where the defendant's car was parked. The defendant entered the residence, went to the 3rd floor, and with a knife, killed Madison Mogan and Caitlin Gonzalez. The defendant, as he left that room, for whatever reason, ended up leaving, or the sheath for a K-bar knife was left on the bed next to Madison Mogan's body. And I can jump ahead. That sheath was tested by the Idaho State Police Forensic Lab, and single source male DNA was found on the snap of that sheath, as well as blood from both Kaylee and Madison and other trace evidence. The state's evidence would show that Xana Knodel was still awake at this time. In fact, had taken a DoorDash order not long before this started. Her room was not on the 3rd floor, it was on the 2nd floor on the west side. As the defendant was either coming down the stairs or leaving, he encountered Xana, and he ended up killing her. Ethan Chapin, Xana's boyfriend, was asleep in her bedroom, and the defendant killed him as well with a large fixed blade knife. I will state for the record that there is no evidence there was any sexual component or sexual assault on any of the victims. I want to make that clear so there's no speculation.
There were 2 other roommates in the house outside of the 4 that they just went over, but they were on a different floor, and one of them woke up during all of this and looked out of her bedroom door and saw a person dressed in black with some sort of container walking out of the sliding door. After she sees this, she texts the other remaining roommate and tells her that no one is answering and she's really confused right now. She then tries to text Kaylee, one of the roommates who was no longer alive, asking her what's going on, but of course she doesn't get a response. Eventually, the 2 remaining roommates get together in the same room. In the meantime, Bryan Kohberger's car is seen on video surveillance leaving the neighborhood.
At approximately 4:20 that morning, so this would have been 15 minutes or so later, the defendant's car is seen on a surveillance camera leaving the area at a high rate of speed. And if the court were to see that, or anybody in this courtroom would see that, you can see the car almost loses control as it makes the corner, heads north, and then turns to go south on Walenta, which is one of the only ways to get out of that part of town.
Kohberger cuts his phone back on at 4:48 a.m. Remember, it was turned off at 2:54 a.m. And then he arrives back home at 5:30.
About 4:48 that morning, the defendant's phone comes back on. And the evidence will show that that phone was located south of Moscow, likely at a side road intersection with Highway 95. From there, the defendant's phone activity tracks him back north towards Pullman, Washington, where the defendant lived.
Around 9 a.m., Kohberger drives back around the victim's house.
Later that morning, Sunday, the 13th of November of 2022, Mr. Kohberger's phone returned to the area of King Road. We don't know exactly what he did, but it returned to that area. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning. He was there for about 10 minutes and then returned to his Pullman residence. About 9:30, the state's evidence will show, evidence taken from the defendant's phone, that he took a selfie of himself on his phone in what appears to be the bathroom of his Pullman apartment with a thumbs up.
The weapon used for this incident was never recovered, but prosecutors say that, according to business records, in the days following the incident, Kohberger began searching for a K-bar knife and sheath, presumably to replace the one that was left at the victim's house. They say he also went to the DMV to change his car registration from Pennsylvania to Washington State, and they highlight this because Pennsylvania doesn't require you to have a front license plate, but a Washington registration would.
Mr. Kohberger proceeded to finish his semester of studies at Washington State University and returned to Pennsylvania for the holidays. Law enforcement at this point were aware of Mr. Kohberger, had been accessing information about him, were trying to find him. They located him in Pennsylvania, and they conducted what's called a trash pull during the nighttime hours, working with the sanitation department back in this neighborhood in Pennsylvania, took trash that had been set out on the street for collection, sent the contents of that from the Pennsylvania residence of the defendant's parents, where the lab experts there were able to identify DNA on a Q-tip as coming from the father of the person whose DNA was found on the knife sheath that was next to Madison Logan's body in the bed. Subsequently, an arrest warrant was issued here in Idaho, and a search warrant was issued in the state of Pennsylvania with the assistance not only of the FBI, but the Pennsylvania State Police. Mr. Kohberger was arrested at his parents' home to return to Idaho. Upon his return to Idaho, a DNA sample was taken from him, and it matched the DNA found on the knife sheath next to Maddie's body.
Kohberger's apartment and car was searched about 6 to 8 weeks after the incident, and police found nothing, but they say that's because he was a criminology student and knew what he was doing.
The defendant's car had been meticulously cleaned inside, and the state would present to the jury that that was part of the defendant's plan in covering up this. The defendant has studied crime. In fact, he did a detailed paper on crime scene processing when he was working on his pre-doctorate degrees, and he had that knowledge and skill.
So the trial for this case was supposed to start in August, and for the last 2 years, Bryan Kohberger has maintained his innocence. His alibi was that he says on that morning he was just out on a drive by himself, which is something he often did to go hiking or go look at stars. And so because of that, it was a surprise for a ton of people that he accepted a plea deal on July 2nd, 2025. The plea was that he pled guilty to 4 counts of first degree and 1 count of burglary.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, enter the residence at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder?
Yes.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, kill and murder Madison Mogan, a human being?
Yes.
Kill and murder Kaylee Gonzalez, a human being?
Yes.
Kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being?
Yes.
Kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being?
Yes.
And for that, his sentence is for 4 consecutive life sentences with no chance of parole, an additional 10 years for burglary, and he waives his right to appeal. The formal sentencing is scheduled for July 23rd, 2025, but those are the terms and how this case wraps up. Was this something y'all had been following? A few people were asking me to do recaps, but now this is your recap. Rest in peace and love to the 4 students who lost their life.